あれは傷跡じゃないわ。
Hmm. Oh, from something they did?
あんなに
No.
も誇らしいもの。
No?
Aoko agreed. What had impressed her the most about those scars was how he treated them simply as part of his past, absent of any regret. Aoko wouldn't have gone so far as to say he was proud, but it seemed her instincts had been correct. Okay, listen, whoever is doing this typesetting, please, for the love of God. It's really hard to read that text. The light text on the light window.
I know,
like,
yeah.
For God's sake. You have a black border around it. I will grant you that. It does make it easier, but like, my God.
Yeah.
Maybe make that border like a little bit thicker, or just don't use the same color on a window would be great. That, and one more thing.
でも一つだけはっきりしたわ。
You saw your underwear.
それじゃあ、不覚にも見惚れてたのは私一人じゃなかったってことよね。
Oh.
アリス。
Well, you admitted to it, huh?
She sure is. But she's also calling out that she saw Alice checking him out.
Yeah.
Busted. Aoko smiled wryly at Alice like a child who knew they were doing something they shouldn't with their friend. It's a cute coat.
Yeah.
Alice was trying to ignore her as best she could. She looked away without saying a word. Aoko let out a satisfied snicker and began walking towards the front door.
じゃ、行こうか。まずはあの公園からでいいでしょ。今回の件はあそこから全てが始まったわけだし。
Right? Yeah. Park seems to be an issue.
She was talking about the local park in Misaki.
Right.
The place where they'd run into the enemy puppets and, of course, where their involvement with Soujuuro had all begun.
Right. New background, sure.
Early the next morning. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Most people were still in their beds sleeping. Although some 24-hour convenience stores had opened last year, Misaki Town was still very much living in the good old days of the early 80s. Hold on. Do we now have a Misaki district of Misaki Town in Misaki City?
I don't know.
Or are you just using town and city interchangeably?
They might just be...
Is Misaki Town the thing you just referred to as Misaki earlier within Misaki City?
Yeah,
How many things named Misaki are there? I mean, there's the high school, but...
Another map would help.
Even the tofu shop in the shopping district, known for opening earlier than anywhere else, didn't open until 6. But this was the late 80s, during the latter half of Japan's bubble economy. It was a time when metropolitan areas never slept. Those in the countryside, however, remained in the past. The homes were blanketed in silence, the streets empty of commuters, and not a single automobile could be heard. The sun was just barely peeking over the horizon. The town would still be asleep for at least an hour longer before it began waking up. It was during this time that someone stepped onto the Kuonji estate. Soujuuro was working the late shift during the winter vacation and had just come home.
At 5 a.m.?
And Aoko was giving you shit for being like 10 minutes late past your 10 p.m. curfew the other day.
I guess he takes his medicine in the morning now?
He moved quietly through the drawing room so he wouldn't wake up Aoko and Alice, who were presumably still asleep. The Kuonji estate had a few established rules. One of those rules forbade more Japanese tea.
Oh. Okay.
What do you mean more Japanese tea?
I'm not sure.
This new rule had only come into effect 3 days prior. It was proposed after Alice saw Soujuuro drinking green tea in the kitchen after dinner one night.
That is the completely wrong color, Soujuuro.
Looking back on it, the decision had been made rather abruptly. That single gasp of surprise was all Alice said. She grasped her head as if she was battling the most vicious of migraines, called for Aoko, and then made the decision to ban all Japanese teas from this mansion.
Ow! Damn.
By some miracle, Aoko managed to negotiate and keep Soujuuro's privileges to barley tea during the summer.
だいたいイギリス産だって初めはグリーンティーが主流だったじゃない。
Aoko had clearly hit a nerve with this argument. Aoko stared at Alice, fairly certain why she was so taken aback by Soujuuro's actions. She wanted Soujuuro to like her fancy English tea.
Maybe. Like, wait a minute, you like tea that isn't mine?
You fucker!
Wow.
Says the guy that doesn't know how to brew it.
Yeah.
Soujuuro grumbled to himself while sipping his hot green tea.
What is this song?
Don't know. Where did you get green tea from? I thought it was forbidden.
Wait, did you sneak tea into the mansion?
Are you smuggling green tea? Or did you, like, is this like Starbucks and he just brought like a...
Yeah, he might have just brought a cup with him from work.
He didn't realize that Alice was upset because he had poured his green tea into a teacup meant for black tea.
Oh, so he ruined the taste with a cup, basically. Wow.
In Soujuuro's defense, this was the only teacup that Alice had given him permission to use.
Yeah.
You can use that cup, and only that cup. Why are you using that cup? It's the only one you said I could use. That's not the right tea! How am I supposed to know? It says tea on the label.
Right.
At any rate, the early morning was his to enjoy. This was his moment to relax with the Japanese tea he'd smuggled in.
Wow, already breaking the rules.
He didn't use this time to read books or watch TV. He just drank his tea and gazed fondly at the garden, or rather the dense woods outside.
Huh.
Soujuuro simply sat, relaxed, and let his mind wander. About an hour passed. Just as he was beginning to feel refreshed, he heard sounds coming from the foyer.
Oh.
He knew it was Aoko and Alice talking, so he rushed to hide his teacup, teapot, and tea leaves in the kitchen.
Oh my god.
But you're using leaves for this!
Yeah, I thought he brought it back from work.
Hiding the contraband was easy enough, considering just how many unused shelves there were in the kitchen. Soujuuro was perturbed by how they wasted the potential of such a splendid kitchen.
Not like they cook much, so...
あら、早いのね、宗十郎。
Oh, yeah, that's right. You were out all night.
Aoko spoke as she took off her white down jacket. Next to her, Alice silently took off her black coat.
いや、今帰ってきたんだ。天城浜の食品工場に深夜のパートで入ることになって、その帰り。
Oh, geez, you were like a town over? Got a factory job, huh?
Soujuuro stuck his head out from the kitchen and gestured that he was about to put on some hot water to boil. Or some water to boil to get hot, I guess. Alice tilted her head slightly at him. Are you using the teapot or the coffee pot?
There's a difference?
It wasn't that she thought his gesturing was funny or anything like that.
天城浜から
Alice glanced up at the clock in the drawing room and her expression darkened.
どうしたのアリス
Aoko asked this from her comfortable seat on the sofa.
別に
No, this seems important.
Why did you react to that?
Alice responded indifferently before finally sitting down as well.
宗十郎、砂糖は一杯だけだからね
Aoko yelled her matter-of-course request into the kitchen.
I wonder if that's another place that Alice's family owns that he works at.
Maybe.
Like every place he works at. That'd be interesting.
Just 1 spoon of sugar. I'll give you 2 for being so sweet. Fuck you! Alright, fine. Only half of a spoon. Soujuuro didn't respond, but it was an affirmative silence. That's not... You can't... Alright, whatever.
Yeah.
This was the result of 2 entire nights worth of cramming that Alice knew nothing about.
アリスは私はミルクだけでいいけど
Milk tea, okay.
But you're being such a tea snob and you're putting milk in your tea.
That's a British thing to do.
If you're gonna be such a snob about your tea, you'd think you'd just be drinking the tea itself and not adding extra shit into it.
I don't know.
Alice responded out of obligation.
了解。ミルクティーだね。
Miruka tea.
Yeah.
For some reason, Soujuuro dutifully answered Alice's request. Completely snubbed Aoko.
Yeah.
ま、いいけど、いちいち突っ込んでたらキリがないし。
Wow.
I didn't want to hear you respond to me anyway, baka.
Yeah, basically. Jeez.
それより珍しいじゃない。アリスがティーバッグのお茶飲むなんて。
What makes you think he's making it from a bag, Aoko?
Yeah.
今日は疲れたから。
Ah, okay.
たまには。
It seems she'd allowed herself to accept another's kindness, at least for today.
ま、いいか。それより宗十郎。あんた、さっきお菓子のこと言わなかった？
Did he?
Did he?
What, the job?
別に言ってないぞ、そんなこと。
そうならいいんだけど。
Something like what?
The two were conversing over a distance of 4 yards. Alice decided to add her opinion to the conversation.
しずきくんがおかしなことを言わない日はないと思うわ、私。
Okay. I mean, that's probably fair.
I would know. I've been watching him very close.
It's just my observation.
Yes, that. Her quiet tone was luckily just low enough that Soujuuro couldn't hear her from the kitchen.
Ah, just Aoko, huh?
そりゃそうだけど。
I agree,
今
but
ちょ
I
っと変
mean,
だったでしょ？
was he?
いや、何が引っかかったのかまではわからないんだけどさ。
そうね。会話自体は普通だったけれど、内容を考えてみると、どこかおかしいわね。
Like that job you mentioned?
Aoko became gradually more irritated as she failed to grasp what had been odd about the conversation. Just then, Soujuuro appeared holding a tray with a teacup for each of them.
何を話してるんだ？単に新しいアルバイトを始めただけだろ。
He put the cups down on the black tape. Black?
Oh.
It looked kind of brown to me.
Yeah, okay.
Without making even the slightest sound. Aoko couldn't complain about how proper his job as a waiter had made him.
Ah, okay. So, skills he picked up at a restaurant there.
While she didn't say anything out loud, she did nod in his direction to show some gratitude. Aoko, however...
天城浜だっけ？あそこってスタジアムがあるところでしょ？ツアーの会場になるから時々行くけど。
Okay. So Aoko does that in her spare time, huh?
The student council president, a supposed model student, loved rock bands.
I noticed from the guitar, yes.
Aoko. You're just the best, you know? Like, you're just the best. I bet you'd be a big fan of JoJo.
Probably, yeah.
Aoko was secretly obsessed with the number of bands and used to travel way out of town just to see them perform live when she was in middle school.
Yep.
Of course, this was a world that Soujuuro was far from familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
それより、また新しいバイト始めたんだ。そんなに働いてどうする気なのよ、宗十郎は。
I'm trying to keep up with the rent that some demons are making me pay.
ああ、よく聞いてくれたね。本人の名誉のために名前は伏せるけど、誰かさんと誰かさんが俺の少ない収入を無慈悲に奪っていくから。
Wow, wow, he's being really honest today. Wow, they sound horrible. I'd hate to meet them.
Yeah. Good news.
Are you being bullied, Soujuuro?
You needed to beat somebody up for you? This was as much resistance as Soujuuro was able to give. You poor fool. Aoko lifted her teacup to her mouth as if she was completely oblivious to Soujuro's monologue.
Well, she has no reason to care.
That sounds difficult.
Yeah.
Do you need me to kill them for you? Alice said this as she set her teacup down quietly. She's being, like, very talkative with him.
Yeah,
all of a sudden.
Definitely more than before.
There are some things she just did not understand. Aoko had to hold back her laughter as she looked at Alice and Soujuuro.
Yeah, it wasn't gonna do you any good.
Soujuro's shoulders fell as he said this.
Your protests fall on deaf ears, Soujuuro.
He took a sip of his black tea, still unsure about the taste.
まあ、アルバイトが多いって分かってくれるだけでいいか。そういったわけだから、冬休み中は夜も留守にする。例の薬はアルバイト先で飲むしかないんだけど。
ああ、それなら心配いらないわ。もうあれはやめた。
Wait, how do you just end that?
That's fine, I got bored of that.
いちいち作るのも面倒だし、もっとしずきくんに似合うのを見つけてきたの。
What did you find?
Aoko had a huge, ominous grin on her face. She put her hand into her jacket pocket and pulled out a little paper bag. It was a small circular object about 20 inches in diameter, wrapped up nicely like a present.
Did you get him a collar?
はい、これは入居祝い。これからはそれをつけておくのよ、Soujuuro.
Soujuuro opened the paper bag. Inside was a white belt. But it wasn't a belt for putting around your waist to keep your pants up.
Yeah.
It was a belt to put around your dick to stop you from... What?
No.
No, wait, this isn't stay night or okay, alright.
Hang on.
To put it as clearly as possible, it was a collar.
Aoko.
Yeah, you didn't know about that, huh?
Alice is like, the fuck, man? I wanted to put a collar on him. Alice's expression darkened at this turn of events. But it wasn't clear whether it was her friend's insidiousness or sympathy for Soujuuro that concerned her.
Yeah, it might be too degenerate for her.
気に入った？
Aoko was clearly a little crazy. At least she wasn't totally serious. It was obvious that it was at least half a prank just to see how Soujuuro would react. But Soujuuro was solemnly considering the collar he'd just been gifted.
Well, he does wear something around his neck every day.
意味はつかみかねるけど、こういうものを人からもらうのはこれが初めてだ。
I mean, I would hope nobody else has given you one of those.
He actually sounded like this would be a happy memory for him. Alice narrowed her eyes at what was transpiring.
けど、これは何に使うんだ？
簡単よ。金庫寺と同じで、飼い犬が主人に逆らうと首を絞めるの。あっちは頭につけてたけど、それよりは首のがマシでしょ？
Soujuuro grimaced when he finally understood Aoko's mean-spirited gift.
Yeah.
He really wanted to ask her what kind of person comes up with such an evil idea.
つまり、秘密をばらしたり逆らったりしたら首が絞まると。
Right, like the golden headband would squeeze Wukong's head if he disobeyed.
やっぱり熱でもあるんじゃないのか、青崎は。
あら、首輪は嫌？せっかくSoujuuroに似合いそうなものを見つけたのに。
I spent money on this, you know. Aoko still had an evil grin on her face. But Soujuuro had a surprising response to this gift that Aoko had clearly gotten as a prank.
それもそうか。毎日毒を飲むよりはマシだし、このベルト自体いいものだし。
Yeah, taking poison pills certainly is a pain.
ありがとう、青崎。
He spoke 100% truthfully. Aoko's face contorted in disbelief, and she could only mumble if he was serious.
人の行為はどんなものだって嬉しいよ。
You are too pure for this world, my dude.
This guy.
それに、それが青崎ならなおさらだ。
Oh, and now you're turning on the fucking flirt.
Yeah.
And with that, Soujuuro put the belt around his neck. He placed it over the bandages already there.
こんな感じかな？きついけどそのうち慣れるだろう。
You're not fooling anybody with that blush there, Aoko. I see it. I see the slanty lines they drew on your face.
Yeah.
Despite his words to the contrary, Soujuuro tugged at the belt uncomfortably and adjusted it. It was such a perverse scene that even Aoko's face was red as a beet, even though this had all been her idea. Perhaps it was because it gave her such a clear reminder of the scars she'd seen the day before.
よし。止め方はこれでいいのか?
I think it changed.
I think so. Aoko retreated guiltily as Soujuuro came closer for her to check the fit of his new collar.
と思ってちゃわからないのに。いいよ。アリスに聞くから。
アリス
Yeah.
Soujuuro shifted his gaze from Aoko to Alice. Alice stared intently at Soujuuro wearing his new collar and said,
ロックね。青子、趣味に走りすぎよ。
That reminds me of Archer's punk rock outfit from CCC. Did you ever see that one?
Probably, but it's not like jumping to mind at the moment.
He's got it's like a red leather jacket, but like a small leather jacket, and he's wearing no shirt underneath it, and I think he has a white collar.
She could not have put it any more bluntly.
Yeah, やかましい。そんなんじゃない。
Hey, stop trying to make this like I like him or something.
もういい。とにかくそういうことよ。これからはその首輪が薬の代わりよ。せいぜい秘密を守ることね。
Oh.
Anyway, I'm leaving. Aoko was oddly emphatic as she spoke before stomping off toward the hallway.
それと、これからお昼まで仮眠を取るけど、くだらないことで起こしたら殺すから。
Okay, what if I wake you up for a smart reason?
Right.
Aoko slammed the door behind her as she left the drawing room. Hey Alice, is she feeling okay? I might be reading this wrong, but I think she might be mad.
Yeah.
Soujuuro stared in amazement.
なんで青崎はいつもいきなり怒るんだろう。
Hormones.
Horniness, you know.
He murmured to himself, forgetting that Alice was standing right there in front of him.
しずきくんには悪意が通じないからでしょう。気にする必要はないわ。
You do understand she was being mean, right? Yeah, but it's more fun to watch her squirm.
Well.
悪意って今のが?
Alice looked up at Soujuuro's innocent response. Is he really this much of a dumbass?
I mean, yeah, pretty much.
There was a glimmer in her eyes that showed surprise at her current actions.
なんでもないから気にしないで。
Oh shit, did I sell Aoko out by mistake?
Yeah.
Whoopsie.
Well, just no reason to go further into
I
it,
gotta
I
be
guess.
careful. I end up talking with this guy and I say things.
Yeah.
With that terse reply, she returned to her usual expressionless self. There was no use explaining Aoko's feelings. Aoko bought that collar for the sole purpose of annoying Soujuuro and causing mischief. When things didn't turn out how she'd planned, her conscience got the better of her. Soujuuro mistakenly thought that Aoko was angry at him, when in reality she was only angry at herself. Alice didn't bother telling Soujuuro all these heartwarming details, though. Not because it was too much work, just because she was never one to have meaningless conversations. That was how she'd been raised.
しずきくんはこれからどうするの?
Speaking of, let's have a meaningless conversation.
Well, to plan the day out, I guess.
Alice suddenly changed the topic. Soujuuro thought for a while before replying.
夕方までゆっくりするよ。ここのところ忙しすぎた。
I think I might go take a nap against a pillar in the foyer. I've heard it's a good place to sleep.
せっかくだからテレビも見ていたいし、お昼には青崎を起こさないといけないだろ。
そう。なら静かにしていて。
Oh, yeah, I guess that TV actually works, huh?
Yeah,
It's not just the VCR.
They mentioned earlier that like Aoko would like sometimes watch the news on it or whatever. I think. It's weird Soujuuro asking to watch TV though.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't track. Alice let out a gentle sigh and rose to her feet. Just keep it quiet. Soujuuro would understand exactly what she meant by those words in just a few minutes.
Okay.
The sun shining through the window was bright. It was just about 9 o'clock, about time for the morning television programs to get going. Soujuuro was shifting on the sofa, staring out the window at the scene outside. The view from the neighboring sunroom showed a courtyard in a state of disrepair.
Yeah.
Tomoya hadn't shown up to cut all of it yet in order to get... Oh, wait.
No, yeah.
Although, this is kind of some Clanad-esque music right now.
Yeah, I guess so.
Soujuuro could appreciate the outdoors in both its natural, wild state and when tamed by human hands.
I think Alice might appreciate that.
Soujuuro muttered to himself, turning another page in his textbook. On the table before him was a mathematics textbook and a notebook with Aoko's name on it. I wonder if they still do those. Do you remember, like, when we were kids, and this was always, like, I don't know, I feel like it was early morning.
Uh-huh.
There was always, like, some weird, like, math review programs on.
I don't really remember
I
that.
feel like it was supposed to be, like, because of, like, when it was, you know, we're talking, like, 6 in the morning or whatever. I feel like it must have been intended for, like, people that were, like, either working on, like, a GED or were, like, SAT review kind of things or something, but, like...
not sure on that.
I remember these very vividly.
Oh, I do not.
Good. They were terrible.
Yeah.
It was just learning, but on TV, and not, like, the fun kind of learning.
Yeah.
Where you get to watch, like, an hour and a half about Lee Harvey Oswald's job at the book depository.
Yeah, or weird science experiments.
I mean, I legitimately watched that yesterday.
Nice. Jeez.
Yeah. On the table before him was...
Yeah.
Yeah. Aoko's name, right.
Yeah, she's lent him some notes, I think. Tombo? Mono? I think it's like 2 O's with a slash through them. Plastic eraser, I think. Huh.
Although at first glance he appeared to be a diligent student studying on his day off, he was in truth only doing so as a compromise. He'd given up on his main intent of watching the morning television shows. The reason why he gave up was simple. He was being considerate of Alice, who sat in front of him with her nose buried in a book. Instead of holing herself up in her room, she'd brought out her old dusty books to read, because she wanted to watch him and have the books as an excuse that she wasn't watching him.
Maybe. I don't know.
Why else would she read out here and not in, like, the privacy of her own space where he couldn't bother her?
Well, she's definitely done some reading on that sofa before.
This is what she meant when she'd said to keep quiet. Soujuuro found it difficult to turn on the TV.
Yeah. Until Aoko has no regard for Alice's quiet.
With that decided, Soujuuro resigned himself to reviewing some of the practice problems he'd gotten wrong. In the drawing room, for some reason.
Yeah.
There wasn't any particular purpose doing it here, but he also had no real reason to study back up in his room. And so there he was, leisurely highlighting his textbook with Alice there in the same room. To Soujuuro, there really was no difference between his room in the attic and the drawing room with Alice, except that one had natural light only and the other had, you know, like lamps and shit.
Yeah.
And couches, as opposed to literally just a bed tucked in a corner.
Yeah. Pretty bleak up in his room.
To be fair, he could probably live with a tiger as long as it didn't cause any trouble. That was both Soujuuro's biggest strength and his biggest weakness. Before he knew it, the clock was showing 11. He'd spent 2 hours doing his math problems, but wasn't even halfway finished. More than that, he was disappointed in himself for lacking the courage to speak up at all. Is she? She's taking a nap.
At the moment, yeah.
He dropped his mechanical pencil onto the notebook and watched it roll away. How did you acquire, like, a cylindrical mechanical pencil? I've never had one that could literally just roll away.
I've seen perfectly round ones.
Like, everyone I've seen has always had a little pocket clip on it. So, like, it would start rolling and then catch on the pocket clip and not be able to roll any further.
Huh. I may have seen some really primitive ones. But yeah, probably more common there.
He also knew that she'd hardly gotten any sleep recently. If she'd been able to ignore him during exams, she probably would have had an easier time. Today's nap was probably the first proper sleep Aoko had gotten in days. Though she showed no signs of exhaustion, despite the fact that she must have hit peak long ago. She always seemed raring to go. It wasn't that she was trying to act tough. That was just the kind of person she was. Always positive, always tough as nails. And that was exactly why she came off as completely irrational at times. But if that was the case, you could probably describe Alice in exactly the same way. Soujuuro couldn't help but feel a little bit inadequate when he saw their single-minded focus on their goals. He'd been so preoccupied with adjusting to his new life that he neglected to think about what he was going to do with himself after.
Well, I mean, yeah, but even if you developed any ambitions now, you might not remember them.
Thinking about this cast a gloomy cloud over his heart. He felt like he'd never find a clear purpose in life like Aoko and Alice seemed to have. At least, not since he'd left the mountains. His old life was gone now, never to return. It was like a kite cut from its string, destined to fly only where the winds took it. And without anything to ground him, he couldn't do anything about the empty future that lay ahead. He could only let himself fly where the currents took him, slowly losing sight of the ground below.
そうだな。便利なものは溢れているけど、本当に望むものは。
Okay, feeling a little purposeless.
The town was full of options, but he could find nothing. He'd asked himself the same questions, time and time again. It never made him feel any better. If anything, it only made him feel worse and worse. That, or maybe he felt that lamenting his own ineptitude would lead to finding some kind of goal or desire someday. Tired of his own sniveling, Soujuuro dejectedly closed his notebook. When he looked up, he saw his own face reflected back at him in the TV screen. His new collar was there around his neck, looking as out of place as ever. Perhaps a fool like him who felt weak when faced with others' strengths did need to wear a collar after all.
まったくだ。悩むのは一丁前になってから。
I'm sorry, what are you thinking about with this collar? Are you thinking of other ways you could use it?
I don't know. Or like that he needs to be taken care of by others and he doesn't like that.
He shook off his thoughts of doom and gloom and sat up straight. After psyching himself up a little, he stood up from the sofa.
よし。何か作るけど、アリスは？
Soujuuro asked, calmly. While Soujuuro had been doing his own thing, he had remained mindful of Alice. Alice looked up, surprised at hearing her name. She'd completely forgotten Soujuuro was even there.
私?
Actually startled.
アリス、朝から紅茶しか飲んでないだろ？どうせ作るなら、いっぱい作った方がお得なんだ。
Without waiting for her reply, Soujuuro headed off to the kitchen while putting on his apron. Alice tried to wave at him to stop, but by then he'd already disappeared into the kitchen. She was hesitant to walk all the way in there just to tell him she didn't need anything. And besides, she was actually hungry. Soujuro's proposal made sense and her empty stomach agreed. Alice was hungry, and Soujuuro was going to make lunch.
So it kind of solves itself, you know?
Making lunch for both of them would save the time and trouble of cooking two separate meals. There was no logical reason for Alice to refuse his gesture.
Yeah, she kind of wanted to, huh?
She decided to stay quiet and tacitly approve his offer. Although at the same time, she was slightly sad that she didn't get to cook for him.
I doubt that she cared that much.
She whispered the words softly, not for anyone in particular to hear but herself. The truth was, however, Alice had been in a bad mood all morning. After checking all the sigils around Misaki City and boarding the first train back from Tokawa, still not Tokugawa,
yeah,
all she wanted to do was spend the rest of her day reading until the words turned into a jumble. Her iron resolve to complete this task would not be interrupted by someone else milling around in the drawing room. This was her mansion, and there was no way she was going to lock herself up in her room on account of Soujuuro.
Right.
However, with that said, she knew it would be wrong to kick Soujuuro out for no real reason. As it stood, Soujuuro had actually kept quiet like she'd asked. He wasn't in the wrong here. If Alice had really wanted to be alone, she should have gone to her room, or made him go to his.
じゃなくて、一人にさせてというべきだ。
Alice had defiantly stayed in the drawing room despite realizing the dilemma she'd put herself in. She'd figured Soujuuro would eventually make a ruckus and run off to hide in his attic room. Her assumption could not have been more wrong. Soujuuro never left the drawing room. Moreover, she'd actually stopped caring that he was there. Though he hadn't paid her any attention, he hadn't ignored her either. They simply sat in silence together without any awkwardness. Alice felt the freedom of being alone with the comfort of someone being by her side. To put it into words, Soujuuro was just that kind of person. That was probably the only reason Alice had been able to sleep so soundly with him next to her. Oh, good. 3 times he said. Oh, wait. No, she's referring to the first time.
Yeah.
Soujuuro continued cooking in the kitchen, oblivious to the thoughts that went through Alice's head. She couldn't see him from the drawing room, but she could easily imagine him cooking in the kitchen. Alice resumed reading after unwittingly stating her feelings out loud a second time. The sunlight beaming into the drawing room showed that it was noon. The sunlight actually looked warm despite it being a cloudy winter day. Just as noon struck, Soujuuro returned to the drawing room with 2 sets of plates. Some food of an indescribable color was piled on the large cream-colored plates.
Huh.
What is that?
I'm trying to decipher it.
She hadn't expected much. I feel like I'm seeing, like, olives? No, maybe not.
It's too zoomed in, I can't quite tell.
That's either like a ball of cheese or an egg or something in the background
there. Is that
there.
some kind of stir fry?
And since she also hadn't requested anything, she could just refuse if it was something she didn't want. But this food left her at a loss for words despite psyching herself up.
She's peeking around her book like that.
Alice spoke as though she was terrified of what had been placed before her.
You just put random stuff on it?
If Aoko had been there, she would probably have punched him.
Alice.
But Soujuuro just confidently placed the 2 large plates on the table. Steam billowed from the mountain of food like an angry volcano ready to erupt at any moment. The thick mystery sauce flowed over the plates as magma might from said eruption. And below it all were a seemingly infinite number of slimy, tentacle-like noodles.
Did you not cook the udon right?
There was really nothing more to say about it. This was clearly the food of a poor, struggling student who favored quantity over quality. All that was required was a basic recipe, the will to cook something, and what few ingredients were needed. The pile of stir-fried noodles with sauce slathered on top was so horrifically bad it was almost an art form.
Ouch.
This was a bachelor's cooking if she'd ever seen it.
Absolutely, 100%.
There was really nothing else you could call it.
Yeah. Single men have some of the worst diets you could imagine.
She'd wondered what he was doing for an hour in there, and it turned out he'd been making this sauce.
With what?
No sauce would have been fine, but Soujuuro had wholeheartedly gone the extra mile. Soujuuro bowed his head slightly and picked up his chopsticks. He'd brought a fork for Alice.
Oh, nice effect there.
She picked up the fork and stuck it into the noodles, half drowning in sauce. Soujuuro began eating, not seeming to care that Alice still sat there looking like she was about to eat poison.
Like a purple smoke coming off the table.
Oh, you don't want that. You'll have to get written out of the story for being too strong.
Yeah.
Seeming to view this as a challenge, Alice furrowed her brow and slowly brought the massive noodles to her mouth. It was a little salty and ugly to look at, but it didn't taste all that bad. If anything, it was actually pretty good.
Huh. I guess he didn't completely fail at the sauce.
Soujuuro put down his chopsticks and turned to speak to Alice.
実際の話、魔術師の話はともかくとして、青崎はまだ誰にも手を出してないんじゃないか。
Alice looked up quietly at the sudden question. She'd been inspecting Soujuro's meal, but now she looked straight at him.
おかしなことを聞くのね、しずきくんは。
Well.
アリスには悪いけど、これは青崎本人には聞きようのないことだから。言いたくなければ答えないでくれ。
Alice didn't respond. Soujuuro resumed eating, not seeming disappointed. Alice stared blankly at him, slurping his noodles. After much hesitation, she replied.
しずきくんの言う通り、青子はまだ人を殺したことはないわ。
Yeah, she showed way too much hesitation before.
その行為自体は何回かこなしてはいるけれど。